Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday message. I'm glad you're here today. I did not have a perfect title for today's message, so I think we'll just go with clothed with humility. I think that's what we're going to talk about. But today we're going to be talking about First Peter chapter 5, verse 5 and 6 in the King James Bible. In any Bible, but it may not match the King James Bible, and that's all we use here at Everyday Man of God Ministries. So, that being said, let's read First Peter chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. So we're going to deal a little bit here with, we'll start to talk about the missing morals in this extremely proud world we live in today. Because if you haven't noticed, we live in a world that is consumed by self-promotion, which was to a large degree for a long period of time. It was mainly in the secular society, with the exceptions, of course, of the 80s tele-evangelicals and so forth, and the New Age merger into some churches in the 70s. But now, social media has spawned a plethora of wannabe self-proclaimed teachers and even preachers. But in my opinion, there is more false, unqualified teachers per every one fake preacher. People are focused on mainstream churches who are not legit today, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But we are ignoring all the deceivers that sit at your fingertips. We type in scriptures instead of turn to them. They have turned into the same thing as the megachurches that they claim to be against. They now build their own brand with hats and t-shirts, mugs, selling their sermons, trying to be influencers, just like the world. They tell themselves, but I'm doing it for God. But yet they use the ways of the world and become too big for their britches, elevating their own names above his. But keep in mind that the path to true greatness is not exaltation. I'm sorry, did I say exaltation? Okay. Exaltation. I can never get that word right. I.e., exhorting of self, but humility before God. Apostle Peter gives instructions for true Christians on how we are to not just relate to one another, but to live for God. Peter exhorts the church to clearly walk in submission, humility, and trust in God's timing. In the beginning of the verse, it starts quite simply. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Peter talks directly to the younger men. Yes, but also both in age and spiritual maturity. He calls them to submit to the elder. Those with, yes, of course, age, but actual experience in life, and not, at the least, spiritual maturity. Submission does not, and some will seem to think this, but it is, well, the world thinks this. We don't. But submission does not equal inferiority. Unless, of course, you are in submission to the world. Pride has infected our society on more levels than ever before. Submission is seen as weakness. But in Scripture, submission is a strength, a virtue, a mark of wisdom. Of course, Jesus submitted to the Father, John 5:30. I can of mine own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. I repeat, he says, I seek not mine own will. That right there. How many men are in it for their own will, their own personal desires, their own choices that are not directed by the one true God? In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, in the King James Bible, of course, children are submit to parents. It reads, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Let me put this forth. We are supposed to be the children of God. He is our Father. And unfortunately, there is a lot of petulant children with bad tempers, mocking others, talking down to others. In the body of Christ, of course, sadly. Of course, I do at times wonder if they were ever born again or just claimed they are. Church buildings are not alone, and this is a problem. We're always attacking the church buildings in and by itself when it's not in the church building in and by itself. Thinking a way to say that. But church buildings are not alone with being rife, widespread with false converts. The YouTube is a breeding ground. Okay, I'm aware that I'm sounding a bit negative, but I'm just trying to be honest. Revivals is just a marketing tool to fool the ones who, I like that. Revivals is just a marketing tool to fool. There's a t-shirt for you. Hey, you want to start selling them? But it is a tool to fool the ones who want to have their what's the saying there? To have their cake and eat it too. A foot in both worlds. Indeed, lukewarm. They are in submission to their flesh, not to God. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, we see wives and husbands. It says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. This is an unpopular thing with today's world, mainstream Christianity, all your little non-denoms and megas and so forth. But I'll ask you this. How many times do you see in the Bible husbands and wives as co-pastors or even co-preachers like you do today in all the mainstream worldly churches, ecumenical churches, and on the YouTube? Men who are sharing the screen with their wives, letting them preach or teach. Some will call it witnessing, but that is not what is happening. There's a lot more going on a different level. Wives don't tell let me say it this way. Biblical wives don't tell their husbands what to do when it comes to the ministry. They support the husband in the ministry. This does not make the woman irrelevant or unimportant. They have amazing responsibilities, which I have talked about before in other videos. I think I have a whole 7-part series on that. I probably should do another one, make it a little bit better and clearer. Submission biblically is not oppression to keep you downtrodden. That would be the world. But it is order. It is part of God's design. So let's talk a little about wisdom. There is wisdom to listening to elders of maturity. Understand the word elders of maturity. You see, throughout time, no matter what decade you're in and what movement we're talking about, young people are they're not sad. Well, some are lost and they are sad. But young people are sadly the easiest target outside of the elderly. Look around. But I'm not talking about elderly at the moment. I want to focus on young people. Young people can often be full of zeal and passion. And I'm not saying, by the way, that that's a terrible thing. But they are, for the most part, lacking in understanding, maturity, and wisdom. Elders of real, true maturity should and do bring a certain level of balance, perspective, and, of course, experience that the young people need to hear. Because they are often seeking something different than what they know. And they can unfortunately be swayed and deceived. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5, and it reads, "A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels." Submission is not about blindly following someone because they sound good and may look the part that you are looking for. We should be honoring the wisdom of those who have obviously walked the road before us, not the ones who pretend. And how about the submission to the brethren in the body of Christ? Yea, all of you be subject one to another. Now, Peter moves on from addressing the young people to now addressing, well, everyone. He now says, all of you. Is this not a command or a directive for the brethren to be in submission to one another within the church? Every Bible-believing Christian is called to practice submission in some way. Paul points to this in Ephesians 5:21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Now we come to a little bit about pride. Pride. Every time. Church divisions, because churches always talk about this. Internet people talk about this church division in church buildings. That's because they're not legit, blah, blah, blah. Church divisions, as in the church buildings, used to be the biggest issue in division. And again, a solid argument existed for that. But we now deal with a different era. Same goalposts, same attacks, but we now see it playing out on social media like YouTube, causing, sadly, broken friendships and marital strife that stem from one root: the weed of pride. Everyone and anyone of all ages, more so younger than older, want to be heard. But these days rarely seem to actually want or desire to listen. Everybody wants to be a leader, a teacher, a preacher, but few want to be led. Few want to be a true pupil. Few want to listen to godly men who are legitimate elders. When we take mutual submission seriously, we have more peace. We resist more on insisting on what we want and start lifting others, like the brethren, above ourselves. How many so-called godly men have forgotten this? Or were they godly men to begin with? In Romans chapter 12, verse 10, it reads, be kindly affectioned, one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another. There's a brotherly love here. Who's talking? Paul, right? You hear a sound in the background. That is me. I am pouring a glass of water. As you know, you get parched sometimes talking. That's a powerful statement, though, Romans 12:10, and yet, I think, forgotten. Let's focus on now the part where it says, and be clothed with humility. Being clothed with humility. I think humility as clothing is a great statement. If I was to try to come up with something, there's no way I could come up with something better than that in the Bible. It's just words don't express. But not just for today, but throughout time. You go back decades after decades. Well, clothing changes, but humility is the dress shirt, right? Or the nice dress that you wear occasionally when you put on a facade of humility. But you should always wear your best. I know, I hear, oh, God doesn't care what you wear. God doesn't care what you wear, but he cares that you want to be the best in his presence. You realize that, right? You don't have to wear a suit and tie. You just have to look like you care. Humility should be obvious and visible in words, attitudes, and even interactions. It should indeed be the garment we wear every day, not as a facade, but because that is who we are. Humility is not pretending to be less than yourself, but thinking of yourself less. It is not about whipping yourselves or false low self-esteem. You depend on God only. Recognizing the value of the brethren, a true selflessness in serving one another. Humility means you and I are teachable and able to accept correctness with brotherly love. What is God's response to pride and humility? When it reads, for God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. God, as we all should know, takes on an unequivocal stance against pride. Remember, he pours out his grace on the humble, not the prideful. The word resisteth or resist means to be in opposition, to be firmly against. Because you see, pride not only puts distance between the brethren, it puts distance between you and God. You can do all the preaching and teaching you want, but your pride will keep you distant. In James 4:6, it reads, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Pride is the attitude that says, I don't need God. I'm better than others. Or I can do this on my own. I've read the Bible 77 times. I know it by heart. This attitude brings God to opposition of you. The attitude brings God's opposition. You see, pride will indeed close your ears to advice, harden your heart to any biblical correction. It will blind you to your own faults, and it may cut off the flow of God's grace. But what happens when you truly humble yourself? I believe God is near to you. He'll lift your burdens. He strengthens your heart. He opens doors no man can shut or open, or no man can open or shut. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. Peter is now moving from relationships among the brethren to relationships with God. Because if we are going to receive grace and walk in favor, we must humble ourselves before Him. Humility is and should be a natural choice. Notice the part that says, humble yourselves. God does not force this on us. It's something we have to do voluntarily. We trust His wisdom over our own understanding. The mighty hand of God refers to His power and authority. It is His hand that delivered Israel from Egypt. It was His hand that led them through the Red Sea. Without the humbleness, they are lost, and those who rely on themselves perish. Part of the humbleness is to accept His timing is not ours. Trust in His methods, not our plans and designs. Giving way to His leadership on His terms, not ours. Submitting to His correction. Now we get to the last part, that He may exalt you in due time. In this part, we learn something amazing about God's kingdom. The way up is being down. Of course, that is to say with lowliness, absent of pride. Those who go low will be lifted up, but only when God decides the time is right. Is God in charge of your promotion, or do you rely on self-promotion? Sadly, we see that not only in the church buildings that the internet preachers are against, but it rests in the internet preachers as well, or teachers. Folks, there is a huge difference between God exalting you and you exalting yourself. Because man's promotion of himself is, well, it's pretty fragile. It may go well for a while, but they will fall because God's promotion is unshakable. God is the only one who will promote you. Other men will lift you based on perceived talent. God lifts you based on your character. Men will drop you when you're no longer useful or fit into their narrative, their ministries, and their ministries may not be directed by God. God sustains those He exalts. I want to finish up with in due time, the final three words. This perhaps tests our faith in due time. Remember, it may not be your time, but when the time comes, it will be the right time. You may feel overlooked, but don't force yourself to be seen. Stay humble. You may feel like you're falsely accused, and you probably are. Stay humble. You may feel forgotten and alone, but you're not. Again, stay humble. God is never late, and He never forgets. He does not overlook you. He will not falsely accuse you. At the appointed time, in His perfect season, He will lift you up. In Psalms chapter 75, verse 6 and 7, in the King James Bible reads, "For promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But God is the judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another." So again, clothe yourself. We talk about the armor of God, but clothe yourself in humility and stay humble. When you see all these people, you're like, how are they getting away with this? How does nobody see their lies? Relax. Be who you are. Stay humble. Don't get involved in all that stuff. Don't try to self-promote yourself. Don't do these things. Hey, listen. Listen, thanks for listening tonight. Listen, thank you for listening. Boy, that was an interesting sentence, was it not? Hey, I appreciate your time. I really do. Um, I say this a lot, and I will continue to say this. I'm always thankful and grateful that you listen to me, not to me, but you listen to these messages and watch some of my videos, and I'm thankful for those things. It's not forgotten. I'm always amazed that people do, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But with that said, continue to stay humble, and if I don't see you and talk to you, have a blessed week. Good night.